Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you are enjoying day 2 of our sessions as much as we are. Up now, we have Jason Harris with his talk on skyrocketing game dev cost. What can we do? Without further ado, I'm going to give you the stage.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for attending this presentation on skyrocketing game development costs. So just to start, a little bit about myself. And instead of writing the slide myself with everybody using ChatGPT now, I decided to ask ChatGPT to create an image based on what it knows about me as my introduction. And here is the image that it created. This will be ChatGPT's introduction of me. So it knows I used to be a professional magician, so it got that right. Kind of crazy hair for the person in the image. It added the magic wand and the cards. It added all the data in there, and I absolutely love data, and I'm always looking at data. So this presentation is packed full of data and insights and information that I collected myself. I do a lot of presentations, so it got that right, but it put everybody in business suits, and I doubt everybody's sitting there today in business suits. But I used to present as a consultant, so kind of got that right. And then I've been in the video game industry for 15 years now, so I got the video game aspects right. What it missed is that I used to be at Electronic Arts. I spent 13 years at EA overseeing external development and building that practice within the company. Then moved over to the strategy side and spent 7 years running corporate strategy, working on lots of incredible games across PC, mobile, and console. And my foray into gaming really started when my parents bought me a Spectrum 128K. And I don't know how many are familiar with this, but back then I had to take a cassette tape and I had to put it in there and press 2 buttons and wait 45 minutes to an hour for these games to load. I spent a lot of time playing Dizzy and marveled at the graphics of Outrun and the physics, as the hair flowing. So very different to today. And most of the time, for anybody familiar with that, when the game loaded, it said error, start again. So you had to do a lot of other things to entertain yourself. Now I spend a lot of time in open world games, love Assassin's Creed, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, and those style of games. Then in my spare time, it's all taken up by these two, spending lots of time outdoors on the beach and hiking with my daughter and dog. Now, for the last 2 years, I've been in a company called Devoted. Devoted is a co-development company. So I've been on the developer side and the co-development side. We're working with all of the biggest game developers out there on lots of incredible games, porting the games, doing co-development, working with brands such as Nike on creating UEFN experiences, with Gordon Ramsay on a sandbox game, and lots of ports to VR and console. And then we have a freelancer marketplace as well, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. But with a freelancer marketplace, we're really trying to make it quick. So when you have an idea, you can start working with somebody in under 72 hours. So that's the quick overview of me, but what you came here for, the state of the games industry and skyrocketing game development costs. So we're going to start with a statistic that a lot of you have probably seen over and over again, comparison of the games industry to other sectors. And the most common comparison that you see is recorded music and box office compared to the size of the games industry. But I wanted to add in here, these are important for what I'll talk about later, but I also wanted to add in here social media apps. Games are now often being considered as a social network and becoming a lot more social in nature. And the size of the social media sector is about 78 billion. Then when we look at toys and games, the size of that sector is about 112 billion. And both of these industries are looking at gaming. And the reason why, it's a $183 billion sector. So huge compared to these other areas. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, because this is very important and why Music is looking for concerts within games, while TV film companies are looking for these transmedia crossovers and bringing gaming IP to the box office, while social media apps are experimenting with different games within their apps, and why toy companies are starting to look at games more and more and invest in games. And we'll cover examples of those later. So the overall industry in 2021, it really hit a peak when it hit 184 billion in global revenue. And that was during the height of the pandemic, when people were at home and they couldn't go outside, they couldn't socialize, they were doing a lot more in games than ever before. And I remember sitting at EA and thinking about the future and saying, right, everybody's playing games now. Gen Z has cited games as their #1 form of entertainment. And that's going to continue to Gen Alpha. So people will continue to play games and do less other activities. And then the restrictions were lifted and people could go out, they could socialize again, they could go to events. And we saw this sharp decline in 2022 in spending games, dropping to 173 billion. And I know the sizing of this image makes it look like a huge, huge decline, but more than it was, but still a big, big decline. And I think at the time, a lot of the research sources were saying that the industry would probably hit 200 billion around 2023. But of course, that didn't happen. People were going out, they were going and watching movies again, participating in outdoor sports, going to see live sports. And still in 2024, the industry hasn't hit that record in 2021. So players started to spend a lot less in games. They also started to play fewer hours in games. So the peak in 2021 was 16.5 hours on average per week was being spent in games for US gamers. We saw that climbing in 2019, 2020, 2021, and we saw that, as with spend, decrease in 2022. That continued to decrease in 2023. And then one source I read recently estimated 2024 time to be about 8 hours. So a huge, huge decline, half the amount of time spent in games than what was spent in 2021. And not only are they spending less time playing games, but also playing fewer games than ever before. I think during the pandemic, we saw people on average playing around 7 games, and that dropped to around 1.5 games. So at the industry in whole, people have been spending less money, spending less time in games, and playing fewer games. This is at a time when we saw game development costs just continuing to increase. So if we look at just this example here of Spider-Man, in 2018, Spider-Man cost around 100 million to develop. Then Miles Morales in 2020 was about 156 million. Then Spider-Man 2 released in 2023 saw a huge increase in the development costs, triple those of the first Spider-Man. And what's incredible is that just 5 hours of cinematics, and this is what players were asking for: bigger content, more immersive, higher, bigger maps, and they expanded beyond Manhattan to Brooklyn and Queens, and spent a lot of money on the cinematic side, but 40 million on cinematics. That's 40% of the budget of Spider-Man 1 just spent on cinematics with Spider-Man 2. So huge increase in dev costs there. And this is a story that we can see in many, many franchises. Just another example with Call of Duty. In 2009, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was estimated to cost 50 million and sold around 25 million copies. Then in 2015, 2019, the next iteration sold around 40 million copies, one costing 450 million to develop, and Modern Warfare costing 640 million. That jumped again in 2020 for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, which estimated to cost around 700 million to develop. And what's interesting is that sold 30 million copies. That's only 5 million copies more than the 2009 Call of Duty that cost 50 million. So 650 more million to develop and 5 million more copies. And it sold less copies even than in 2015 with a lower cost game to develop. We don't know the cost of Modern Warfare 3, but I'm assuming that the development costs have continued to increase. And especially looking at Moby Games and the number of people involved in shipping these titles. So if we look back to 2009, Modern Warfare 2, that had about 426 people involved in shipping that game that were listed in the credits. And then we fast forward to Modern Warfare 3 in 2023, and over 9,000 people were listed on Moby Games in the credits as being involved in getting that title out the door. So huge teams required to ship these games. And not only huge teams, but also increased complexity. So sources cite that 40 external partners were involved in shipping that game, and 15 internal studios were involved as well. So huge team and huge complexity in managing different internal studios and the external studios to ship the Call of Duty. And we're seeing this, as I said, across many different franchises. So when we look at Far Cry, we can see huge increases as well, from Far Cry 1 with 350 people, all the way to Far Cry 6 with 6,800 people cited as being involved in shipping the game. Final Fantasy, another example of huge increases in the number of people. When you look at growth in 2002 with 166 people involved to almost 4,000 people in 2023. So this is a trend, and I looked at many different games and continued to see this pattern of a number of people involved just absolutely skyrocketing. And this is really impacting the costs of developing games. And that, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen people spending less time in games, and we've seen people spending less money in games and playing fewer games. And that has led to big publishers really rationalizing their portfolios. So this isn't fully up to date because there have been a lot more changes recently, and I ran out of room on the slide. But we've seen Microsoft shut down some studios and cancel games recently, EA cancel games, Warner Brothers, Embracer Group canceled 29 unannounced games. And across the board with all of the big publishers going through and really saying we need to focus on the highest performing games and cut a lot of the others. And as everybody's fully aware of, this has resulted in a huge number of layoffs across the games industry. So in 2022, we saw about 8,500 layoffs, increasing to 10,500 in 23, and then peaking at 15,000 last year. By July 2025, we had seen about 6,247 layoffs. So we're kind of almost on track to surpass 2022 again if numbers continue and layoffs continue as they have so far this year, and maybe even surpass 2023. Meanwhile, as I said in the beginning, there are a lot of sectors looking at the games industry and how they can enter the games industry, because they look at the size of the sector overall, and they hear the data around Gen Z and Gen Alpha citing games as their number one form of entertainment. So brands are looking at games to reach those younger audiences. And different brands are entering at different parts. And I've created a scale here, kind of light experimentation in the games industry to deeper and spending a lot more in the games industry. So we look on the left-hand side, and we've got luxury brands such as Balenciaga and Gucci that have created cosmetics in games. We've got Invisalign that created an office in Livetopia in Roblox. So you could go in and you could check out, I guess, the little Invisaligns. I don't know if you could try them on with your Roblox character, but interesting integration there with them experimenting with games. We've seen Walmart continually try different types of experiences and grow those experiences over time. Vans World, a very, very popular skating world. We've seen the New York Times acquire some games, and as we go to the right, companies spend a lot more, and I'll touch on these in a few slides. So just some data which I found absolutely astounding in terms of these brands' foray into games. So when we look at Gucci, they sold a virtual Gucci bag for over $4,000 in Gucci Garden, which is just incredible that a digital version of a bag would cost around the same or sell for around the same as a physical item. Vita Coco is a company, I think, that was very, very skeptical about whether they could reach an audience through games. And they launched Vita Coco on Roblox and quickly saw over 11 million monthly visitors to that experience. Fidelity, a financial services company, really wanted to reach a younger audience through games to teach them about saving and financials. So they created Pancake Empire, and we're seeing almost over 6 million monthly visits. So you can see these financial services, retail, food and beverage companies, luxury brands, all turning to games and seeing huge numbers as they can reach new, younger audiences. And the same is true on UEFN as well. So we're seeing a lot of these brands. We saw Balenciaga costumes or cosmetics within Fortnite, Star Wars within Fortnite, we saw a Ferrari car within Fortnite. So a lot of brands experimenting with building games. Some are even going really big. So when we look at Disney, they invested 1.5 billion into Epic to start building maps, to take that experience from the physical theme parks into the digital world, so you can continue to experience the brand in an immersive way. And then Lego has also gone big on Fortnite, building out lots of different islands, Lego Prop Hunt, Battle Arena, Cat Island Adventures, and many others. And then on the Roblox side, I mentioned Walmart earlier and their growing experimentation within games. And recently, they've really grown the number of experiences. They started small, I think, with a holiday experience. Now with Walmart Discovered, you can explore the world and you can play lots of different mini games. But you can also buy physical items. And this is something new that I've experimented with, where you buy a physical item and then you get the digital double in game. So they had 13 items to purchase, headphones, bags, coffee mugs, and then you could walk around a game and you can have it on your desk at the same time. And IKEA had an interesting experimentation as well, where they created the IKEA showroom within Roblox, and they were actually hiring people to walk around and interact with people in the showroom and try and sell the products. So we're seeing a lot of brands experiment with games to reach younger audiences. And a lot of these new entrants are seeing huge growth as they focus on games. So Hasbro, and I mentioned toy and the size of the toy market earlier, and the toy companies are now looking to games as a way to generate additional revenue and reach younger audiences. And the Hasbro CEO said they're going all in and becoming a digital play company. So they've earmarked $1 billion for internal game development. With Scopely, they've seen $3 billion from Monopoly Go, and cited in Q2 2024 that 15% of game revenue, or 15% growth in game revenue, while traditional consumer products in the company declined 20%. So a company that's seeing huge growth from the gaming side. And the New York Times, with Wordle, they acquired a few different games, and I found this really interesting, that they've generated 11.2 million in in-app purchases. They have 10 million in 2024 daily players playing these games, and have now said that their games are more popular than the news on the site. So We've covered kind of trends in the industry and what's happening. So what's leading to these skyrocketing game development costs? Well, earlier I showed some of the data that shows that the game team sizes are growing rapidly. So this is really one obvious reason for the increases, that more people are needed to ship these games than ever before, and that increases the overall costs. But going beyond this, I spoke over the last year, I've spoken to about 60 to 70 different large developers to ask them, what is driving up the cost of development in your studios? Everyone I spoke to said the cost of development is increasing. And I wanted to find out, why is there a solution, one solution to try and bring down the cost of development? But you can see from all these reasons that were cited, it is pretty complicated. There's not just one golden arrow that says, okay, we just focus on this and it will bring down costs. It changes from studio to studio. So going through some of these in a little bit more detail, I bucketed them into these 4 areas. So the first area is complexity. Players are, some cited that players are demanding more content than ever before. And this is especially true with studios that I spoke to that have franchises. When the first game, such as Spider-Man, is released, players want more content, more immersive content, bigger maps than ever before. So on the franchise side, we're often seeing this push for more content. It's becoming more expensive to reach players on different channels and market to these different players and pull them into the games. Complexity is increasing when we think about new features that are needed in games. And I'll again talk to this a little bit later in terms of these features. And more specialized teams that are needed to build the games. Platforms is one that I hear of a lot. There are so many different platforms today that games can be launched on that it's becoming increasingly expensive to be where the players are. When we look on the VR side, we see the Vision Pro from Apple and the push there for games. We see Oculus and Meta's push to port games. Other ones such as ByteDance's Pico device. So lots of VR platforms competing, mobile devices, consoles. We see new handheld decks, Steam Deck and others, and really games appearing everywhere. Yesterday, I was at the Meta Connect conference, and they announced the new Ray-Ban glasses with a little screen on the right-hand side, saying that games one day will also be played in this little screen in your glasses here, with new hand controls where you put on a wristband and you just move your hands to control. So in the future, it looks like glasses, eyewear will be another screen that you need to have games on. So this just makes games more complex than ever before, working out how to port to these different platforms and which platforms you need to be in. And then lastly, at one point in time, it was thought with these franchises that you could reuse a lot of the content. But many developers have said they can't because of the leaps in fidelity. It's more expensive to up-res previous assets versus just creating them from scratch. So a lot of them can't reuse the assets in their asset library from games they released 2, 3, 4 years ago. So moving on from complexity, the next set of reasons I heard about were market pressures. So a lot of them, the developers I spoke to, feel the pressure of mobile games. They continue to increase in quality as mobile devices become more and more powerful. Graphics become higher fidelity, the experiences become longer. So they really feel the pressure of, especially on the console side, in upping the level of those games. The market needs continue to shift. There's so many disruptive technologies and changes at the moment. It's just really hard for some developers to stay on top of what players want today. Many cite that more market research is needed to understand what players want and the changes that are coming, so that when they release their game, it's not already out of date. pressure, as I mentioned, for sequels to be bigger. Many indies I've spoken to are saying that before they could just go with their pitch decks and go through the pitch deck. This is my idea. This is the game I want to build. And they would get funding with that. Now, a lot are coming back and saying we actually need playable demos. And we need to spend a lot of time and a lot of money in these amazing playable demos to convince the VCs to fund the game. Lastly, market pressure. It's a very crowded market. There's so many games. It's so easy to develop games now in terms of the access to technology, to Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, developing games in Roblox. At the Seattle Slice Indie Game event a couple of weeks ago, there was one incredible game that I saw, and I went up to the person and said, "Who developed the graphics?" And the person said, "I did." "Who designed the game?" "I did." "Who programmed it all?" "I did." And it was a 15-year-old that had programmed this incredible game, and everybody at the event was saying, that's a one-person studio that developed this incredible game, and 15 years old, and did the art and the engineering and the game design and really created an incredible game. So when you have that ease of access, the market's becoming really crowded with the number of games that have released. And as I mentioned earlier, people are playing fewer games. They're sticking within certain games for a lot longer than they did ever before. And then the overwhelming amount of player feedback. And I think a lot of you have probably faced this, that now you need to often send out a beta, early access, then the feedback comes in. And now with all the social media channels, you've got people posting on Reddit, people posting in Discord, and all of these different places commenting on your game. And you need to listen to all these players. And there's just so much feedback that this drives up the cost of development, because you're consuming it all. You have to have people to process it, think about what changes in the game, and then alter the game. Talent costs are also increasing. We're seeing increased competition for talent. We're seeing dev teams growing quicker than ever before. Longer ramp-up times as games are becoming more complicated. It takes a lot longer to onboard people. Higher salaries. And people are just having to polish games for a lot longer than ever before to get it ready to really compete in the market. And then there's a lot of niche talent that is becoming a lot more expensive. Then lastly, this bucket of exec pressure, which I heard from quite a few developers, that said that sometimes there's a different vision or lack of direction, that the games are reviewed with the exec teams, and the exec teams give them a new direction based on things that are being heard. But it's very high level, and sometimes it's different to the creative vision. So trying to align on that also drives up costs as you're trying to iterate with the game. So another reason that games are becoming, costs are increasing, is really games are expanding in terms of the modalities that are being incorporated. A few years ago, studios only had to worry about this play component in the top left, and how do you create an amazing, fun game. Now, players of today are expecting some element of create. They want to build something within the game. And that's either creating within the game or creating content that they can push to social media, videos, clips to share with people. More people than ever before are watching games, and especially the younger audiences. And a lot of developers have to think about this watch component. How do you get the game to be viral? How do you get people to watch it? And I'm hearing some amazing innovations in the indie community about this watch component too. Then the social side, as games are becoming more social, and some social networks in themselves, how do you integrate these social networks? And this really makes games more complicated and drives up the cost as you're thinking about which of these to lean into and how deeply to lean into them. And as a result, we're seeing more game delays than ever before. In 2024, about 79 games were delayed. 2023, 76 games. I haven't looked at 2025 data yet, but the number one reason cited has been polish, that they're getting feedback from players and others and are having to go back and further polish the game before launching. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some had cited games need to be bigger than ever before. So I just wanted to look into this in a little bit more detail. And there are some games out there, such as Assassin's Creed, which on the completionist side, which I am a completionist, I just play and play and play Odyssey for years and years to complete as many side tasks as possible. But we're saying the completionist numbers go up and up and up on Assassin's Creed. However, others saw a peak at one point where they tried to push more content for the completionists and a little bit more for the main story, but they're kind of normalized now. So Final Fantasy, we're not seeing bigger games. Same as Call of Duty. And around 2015, we saw this huge spike in content. But for the most part, we've seen the games, around 6-7 hours for the main story. So how are companies responding to increasing costs of development? This is probably the number one I'm hearing. Smaller teams than ever before. Super, super lean teams. I'm hearing AAA studios being established to create new AAA console titles with 20 to 30 people. Studios, they're a third of the size as they would be before. And when we look at the games at the DICE Awards that were nominated for Game of the Year, Astrobot only had 65 people on that game. Balatro, one person. Black Myth Wukong, at peak, was 140 people, but started around 13. So pretty big, high fidelity game there. So we're seeing game teams smaller than ever before in big AAA studios and on the indie side. And a lot of these studios are saying, what is the core that we need within the studio? The most important, kind of build a game, build a fun game, design the game. And then how do we augment that with additional talent? And we're seeing more and more studios, whether they're smaller indie studios, AA studios, AAA studios, look at the balance of different talent involved across a distributed development model. And this is really what we're saying to kind of bring down the cost of development. And when we look at some recent data on how much studios are spending on external development, we're seeing more money shift towards this bucket from internal development to external development. And for 2025, we're seeing a big increase in the number of companies earmarking 5 to 10 million for spending on external development. And on the 16 to 25 million area as well. And fewer companies spending sub 500,000 on external development. So we are seeing these shifts over time of more money being pushed towards external development. When we look at the reasons for that, the number one reason is flexible ramp up and ramp down of different skills. So I said, a lot of companies are keeping the core skill sets that they will use 100% of the time internal, and then saying, okay, we need to ramp up VFX artists and ramp down, or ramp up the concept team, ramp down, ramp up the character team, ramp down quickly. So they're leveraging this external talent for quick access to different skills to be able to bring them in when needed and then ramp them down really quickly. Second reason, with 63% of the respondents saying that they use external development to build more content at lower cost. And that's the highest it's been since 2019. They're really trying to drive down the cost of development and looking to these external partners to say, I want to build more content, but I have a lower budget. Thirdly, people are using external partners to find hard to find skills, hard to find capabilities, niche skills. And then lastly, to support the content needs for live services, adding an additional pod in there so the internal team can focus on the next game and then the external partner can run live services. And outside of using traditional service providers, we're also seeing a lot of studios turn to freelance artist pool as kind of a new area of talent to unlock and bring into game development. And when we look at ArtStation, we're seeing a huge increase in the number of freelancers on that platform. So now I think it's about 809,000. I checked yesterday, so it just continues to grow year after year. And that's partly because a lot of people being impacted by the layoffs in the industry and they're turning to freelancers. But it's also because the work is out there. And now it's becoming a viable way to make a living. People can live where they want to live if they need to be close to family or for other reasons, and they can continue to work on great games because it's a more accepted model today. And at the moment, over the last couple of months, I've been working on a report that's going to be launched in 2 weeks' time on the state of freelancing in the games industry. So this is a few of the slides from that report. But when we look at different countries, we're seeing North America as a very mature market for freelancers. South America, surprisingly, increasing in maturity and prices going up quite quickly. And we're seeing a lot of North American studios look to South America for access to talent across art and engineering because of the time zone, because of some of the cost benefits, but prices are going up in various countries where these clusters of great talent are forming. When we look at Western Europe, very similar to North America in terms of higher costs. And then when we look at the Middle East and Africa, we're seeing new talent pools. These kind of the new lower cost markets across Turkey, across Nigeria, Egypt. We're starting to see little pools of talent open up that new studios and new freelancers with experience in the games industry. And then in Asia, we're seeing Vietnam and Philippines really becoming creative hubs, commanding slightly higher rates as these pools were opened years and years ago through different service providers and studios, and have really grown into be amazing places for game talent. So I've got a shameless plug here. That's one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that we set up Devoted Fusion really as a place where you can find talent quickly. So what we built is a solution where you can take a reference image for your game, you can drop it into a search, and it looks through all of the portfolio of pre-vetted artists that we've gone through and qualified for the platform, and you can quickly find the artists that you want to bring onto your platform with no worries and within 72 hours. So that's end of shameless plug there. Another way that game developers are looking to bring down costs is with the use of AI. And we see some really leaning into AI, some pushback on AI. But I think EA is a great example where the CEO, Andrew Wilson, recently said AI is not merely a buzzword for us. It's at the very core of our business. And AI was used for college football 25. And there's lots of really great videos out there from EA talking about how they used AI. So it was used to generate 150 different stadiums and 11,000 plus players in college football. Now that number of players and that number of stadiums would not have been possible within the development time previously. So this is where AI was leveraged to give the players even more than was originally promised, even more players, even more stadiums to play in. So we see kind of Electronic Arts really bringing more to players and bringing down the cost of bringing that amount of content to the players. And then Netflix also leaning into AI, where they recently said AI will accelerate the velocity of development, unlock truly novel game experiences that will surprise, delight, and inspire players. So still to be seen what Netflix is going to unlock there. Using AI for game development. This quote went out and I haven't seen too much since. So the future, as we look at everything that we've covered, we are going to surpass that $200 billion mark. Current forecasts say by 2027, the games industry will have surpassed 200 billion. which is fantastic. So we're back to growth again. And I'm really bullish about the amount of innovation that's coming from the indie community. I've spent a lot of time speaking with different indie developers and looking at their pitches. And there's some incredible innovation, really leaning into what I showed earlier across the play side, across the watch, the social, the create, things I've never ever seen before, which I'm excited about the games that are going to be launched. So I think we will see. We've seen some amazing people leave big AAA developers, form studios, and really executing on these innovative new games. Also, I think we're potentially going to see an expansion moment coming. So by expansion moment, I want to show an example of TikTok. So in 2018, TikTok launched, and a lot of people were really worried, saying, okay, everybody's just going to go to short form content. They're never going to watch long form again. This is the decline of YouTube. People aren't going to be looking at images in Instagram anymore, just looking at videos. They're not going to be reading on Twitter/X. But that was very different. We actually saw the launch of TikTok become an expansion moment. People spent more time in social media, more time consuming YouTube content, more time in Instagram. So it served as where people thought it would impact every other social network, it actually increased the amount of time spent in social media. So the question is, will AI actually be this expansion moment for gaming? Will it unlock lots of different ways to build games, to bring down the cost of development, to innovate within games? And that's really to be seen. And that could be an incredible expansion moment to see people go back to and spend more time in games and spend more in games. So some of the things that we've covered, game studios, I think, will become more disciplined around headcount growth, really thinking about who should be on the core team and how is that augmented. New entrants will continue to enter the space. I covered a lot of different brands entering the space. More and more companies will be looking at how do they reach different audiences through games. And some of those may go even bigger into games. Competition for experienced talent will continue to intensify as all of those other industries start to leverage game engines such as Unreal and Unity, and look to build games themselves. They'll be looking to bring that game talent into their companies. The Hollywood model will become the norm in the games industry. By the Hollywood model, I mean that just having that core team and then bringing everybody you need in when needed, and then ramping down quickly. And then AI will shift from replacing parts of the workflow to reinventing entire pipelines. Today, we're seeing AI really just, a lot of companies look at it and say, okay, how can it be used to expedite the concept phase, and then we'll use the traditional pipelines. But I think it will completely reinvent these pipelines over the next year or two. So that's the overview of skyrocketing game development costs, with some examples of those costs and how different companies are bringing down the costs. On the left-hand side, you can scan that QR code, and I have a bunch of this data available on LinkedIn and a couple of articles where you can read some of the commentary, you can download the slides and the images. If you want to try out Fusion yourself, it's free. If you want to drop in an image and see what freelancers it gives you, then scan the QR code on the right-hand side. And now we can move into Q&A, and I'm 45 seconds.
Look at you, spot on. All right. We'll leave this little QR code up for a second, and then we'll get into questions. I was absolutely floored by the price of that Gucci bag in Roblox.
I know. It was, I don't know who spent $4,000 just to walk around with that Gucci bag in Roblox, but it's a lot of money.
That's absolutely crazy to me. All right, let's go ahead and pop this down, get into our first question. So, what strategies have you seen studios use to keep development costs under control without sacrificing quality?
I think a lot of studios have, as I said, turned to external partners. And it's really important to find the right partners and and really test them out. Do the due diligence. Do they meet your art style? Can they hit the quality you're looking for? And there are some incredible external partners out there, co-development partners, ones that can do UI, UX, create various art for your game. So I think that's probably the number one strategy I've seen: finding great external talent in a lower cost market that will help bring down the cost of development, and testing them out, doing the due diligence, running R tests to really ensure that they can hit your quality bar, and then moving forward and building long-term relationships with those partners.
All right, here's our next one. Do you think that rising costs pushing the industry too much forward safe bets instead of innovation?
So do you think the rising costs pushing the industry too much towards safe? Yes. So that's a really great question. And that's where we've, I think, seen the rationalization of portfolios with a lot of big game developers. And I read few articles around how the more innovative games, the improving games, the genre mashups were being cut because they weren't safe bets. It wasn't known whether those games would really um, sell as well and see the traction as well. So we've seen a lot of big developers just say, okay, we've got these core games that are really performing well. Let's focus on those. Let's focus on the community around those. Let's make them bigger experiences. Let's focus on new content, new features, and really delighting that community versus um, publishing new IP. And we've seen a lot of new IP launched recently not fared too well. Seen a lot of new IP launched and shut down pretty quick from multiple game studios because it's just not getting the traction. It doesn't have the awareness. So yes, I think that skyrocketing costs has made it more difficult, because if you look at if you go to the LinkedIn article, and it's also going to be in the freelancer report that I'm publishing, the initial cost of development are only the start. Once you launch that game, you can spend the same amount on marketing that you spent on the development costs in some cases. So games, it's really expensive to develop a game. It's really expensive to market a game and get the brand awareness for that game. And then afterwards to continue creating all of the live services content. So yes, I agree. It's pushing towards safe bets at the moment while players are spending less. But I think it's leading to so much innovation in the indie community. As said, I've been to a lot of different indie events recently, and I'm just blown away with some of the innovation coming out, and looking forward to a lot of those games to be released over the next couple of years.
All right, so on YouTube, Nick's had a lot of questions from how to make a good game, how to make a good pitch deck, but we're going to go ahead and throw this one up. So they've been posting a lot of work on Discord channels. What game engine should beginners start with?
What game engine should beginners to start with? I guess I guess that depends on what you mean by beginner. I don't know what their definition of beginner is here. Um, I've been trying to do a bit of development myself to learn more about game engines, but I'm not a developer. I did not study in engineering at any point. I went to Roblox Studio to learn because there's some great tutorials. They have a great tutorial in there. So for real beginners, Roblox Studio, and that's why kids are starting to build games today, and incredible games, because it's pretty easy place to start for a real beginner. And then there's UEFN and building games there. If you're talking a kind of a beginner for more serious game developer studio, then probably Unity be it Unity or Unreal, but maybe I would lean towards Unity as it's free to use. There's a lot of incredible training resources out there. And I will add, you said there was a question about pitch decks and how to build a great pitch deck. I'm more than one service we offer at Fusion to really help indies is I do free 30-minute pitch deck reviews. So if you're interested, ping me through LinkedIn and we can set up time and I can share my experience reviewing different pitch decks there and give some tips and tricks. And it's something I just do in my spare time for free.
Awesome. Not to step on your toes, but in the indie game business Discord, we also do free pitch deck reviews.
That's great.
Sorry.
Brilliant.
We have Kimberly and Omar come in and spend an hour critiquing your review and giving you feedback that you can take away. But it is broadcasted on the Discord for everybody to watch. So if you're not comfortable with that,
loads of amazing resources. Loads of amazing resources for getting pitch deck reviewed. Yeah.
Here's a comment from what you were just talking about. Cybershell said, "No baby steps. Those are for babies. A rule I live by personally." All right. So Nick also wants to know, do horror games still work for ideas? Horror games are very popular, but it's a very crowded market, so you have to be a bit more innovative. But Jason, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, that's very different to the presentation topic. But my strategy role at EA, I spent a lot of time looking at horror games because we were trying to decide whether to remake Dead Space. And really understanding, is the horror genre growing, shrinking, and what types of content are people consuming? And yes, there is a huge fan base for horror games still. That's why we relaunched Dead Space, and it was an incredible remaster of that game and very successful. We see these other games that just get it right, like Fortnite at Freddy's, that's done really well and it's available on lots of different platforms. And now there's a film. So yeah, horror games, definitely there's still an appetite. And I think there was an article published recently somewhere that said horror genre is on the up again, and more interest, and especially among younger generations. I read that Gen Z just at the moment loves horror content and being scared. So yeah, if you get it right with something innovative and different, then there's still seems to be a growing market.
I'm a huge Dead Space fan. I own the remaster as well, but yeah.
When I joined EA, I said, "What game should I play on mobile while I'm traveling?" And somebody said, "You have to play Dead Space, but what you've got to do is put the headphones on, turn the lights off." So I was traveling and I was in a hotel room somewhere in Eastern Europe, and I turned all the lights off and it was pitch black, and I put my headphones in, started playing that game. Within like 4 minutes, headphones out, lights on, put a cartoon on the television because it was so scary with the noises of the creatures running around and then suddenly dropping from the vent above. Like, no, this is far too scary. So yeah, that's a game that just did an incredible job with the sound effects and the build up through the game, making it really, really scary.
Yeah, you have to use headphones for that game. Like it's a necessity, so you can get completely into it.
Immersed.
It can be very scary. All right, so let's put this one away. Cybershell had another comment. It's certainly a lot of pressure now, especially as audiences get more numb. I'm afraid that even quality and unique games will end up drowning. What do you think about that?
I think most important is finding the fun in games. If games are fun, people will play them. And we're at an interesting point where a lot of big developers, they're always looking at quality in terms of fidelity. and saying, okay, we've got to keep on making characters more realistic, environments more realistic, continue to push the boundaries of fidelity. But it's got to a point where the eyes can't really see sometimes the difference in the fidelity of some of the assets. And we're seeing these breakthrough games like Among Us, like graphics very simple but really really fun, or Fall Guys, Balatro. Everyone I speak to seems to be playing Balatro, but they didn't go all in on the graphics, but really fun game and unique mechanics in there. So I think that's what's most important today, that it's you're finding the fun. It's a really fun game. And then of course when games are played kind of socialized and played within networks of people, we really see them taking off as well, because a lot of these games that take off, kids are playing them, they talk about them in the schoolyard, and then their friends say, oh, I've got to go and play it as well. And that's where you see these games growing. So when games are kind of viral, social, and really fun, then I think that's where the definition of quality is now versus sometimes the graphics side.
All right. Another one from you too, from Dan. Considering the price of the Gucci bag, how lucrative do you think the market for knockoff cosmetics in Fortnite and Roblox?
I have no clue on this one. I'm not going to give any investment advice, and I'm not going to give any advice saying that you should go create knockoffs. But I think that must have been tied to I should have looked into it. I didn't look into whether it's tied to the sale of a specific Gucci bag or a special event or what it was used for. I'm sure they're not day in, day out selling bags for $4,000. That was kind of probably like you saw with some of these NFTs, where people were spending crazy amounts on NFTs just because they were tied to LeBron James or something, a specific moment at a specific time, and very scarce. But yeah, I don't think it's a day in, day out that people are spending that amount of money.
Hopefully not. I mean, it would be great for the people like not Gucci, because they don't need all that extra money. But for somebody who did need it, it'd be awesome. But for the bigger brands, like, yeah, that's crazy. I just thought about, you were talking about Hasbro and like Walmart and whatnot, and how if you buy an item in game, you could have it. No, if you bought an item in person, you could have it in game. Back in the day, Neopets did the same thing. I'm talking like years upon years ago. You could buy like a little Neopets toy. This was like an online web-based community of little pets and whatnot. But you could buy like a pet and scan it and get the pet in the game.
Wow.
And I thought that was like the coolest thing. This was a long time ago. So it's kind of cool to see that it's,
Yeah,
coming
Lego
back.
did something kind of similar for a while with the kids app, where you could build Legos, you could scan it, and then it was in the game and you could play it. But yeah, I think we're going to see an increase. There's a lot of companies talking about digital doubles. And there's some incredible things coming from a lot of companies. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation from Meta around some of the things that they've recently been announcing as well around digital doubles. So.
All right. Another one on YouTube from James. Gen AI is a no-no for certain genres. Example, cozy. Do you think some genres which are harder to reduce the costs on will get left behind as a result?
Interesting question. Do you think some genres which are harder to reduce the cost on will get left behind? I don't think so. I think genres are always changing in terms of popularity. I remember at one point I was looking at the match 3 genre and said, I don't think there's anything left in the match 3 genre. We're just seeing this decline in the genre. There's just a flood of match 3 games. And then suddenly I forgot which game it was that started to innovate, putting with mashups with match 3 with builder elements or RPG elements. Then we saw this huge growth in the match 3 genre again. So I think it's all about innovation and keeping some of these genres fresh. I think for a long time we've been looking for innovations in the sports racing genre. Sorry, we've seen kind of this decline in people playing racing games because they're getting the racing fix from other games that have racing components. So no, I think it's all about, sometimes you see a flood of copies and people get fed up of a specific genre because it's just so many games and they're all the same. So I think it goes to the innovation side and continuing to innovate and create amazing experiences with amazing IP.
All right, so we're having trouble with our next speaker. Do you mind having more of a convo with me, or do you have somewhere you need to be?
I can take are there more questions?
We have a few comments.
Okay, let's read the
Danny
comment.
said,
Only nice
Webkins
comments, please.
Webkins is thinking of bringing their stuffed animals back. I completely forgot about Webkins.
I
I
don't
was
know.
never into them, but
Yeah, I don't know Webkins. What
they were
were
like
they?
these little plushy things, kind of like, I don't remember, but they were like little fuzzy plushy thingies that you could like scan stuff. I'm a bit too old for it, so I never got into them, but I do remember Webkins.
It says, how do you say it again? Labulu, Labulu, Labulu.
Webkins,
Um,
Webkinz.
yeah, I've seen a lot of companies look at stuffies and think about bringing them back because of these recent crazes around the Labulu, Blabu. I can't actually look.
Oh, those
What's it called?
thingies.
What's it called?
The
Oh,
little rabbitly things. I don't know
yeah,
what they
yeah,
are.
everyone's going crazy. And I've seen a bunch of other companies like, we had really cool stuffies in the 90s. Let's bring them back too. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll make their way to games at some point, cartoons and games.
My cousin's wife was hunting one of those bunny labubu, whatever they're
Oh,
called,
that's,
things for her
yeah.
daughter. And she went to so many stores and was finally able to grab one. And I was just like, I don't know if I would have that much into me,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go to all those stores. Tom says Skylanders, physical items you put on a reader to get into the game. So there's loads of other things. So all right, so our speaker is ready now. So thank you so much,
yeah. Thank
Jason.
you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, chat, for putting in questions and comments. Next up, we have Daphne with Play to Win DLC Edition, a legal update to how indie devs can succeed. So we'll be here. We'll be back shortly. Bye, everyone.